Would you trust your life with a doctor who would only take an 8-hour self-guided online course? Probably not. Yet, why do we do this with coaching? Buckle in because you're going to really enjoy this conversation. Welcome to the Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I'm your host, Catryn Becker. And in this podcast, we interview all sorts of different interesting and successful people because we want to learn what they've learned in their career. Because behind every successful person is a mountain of failures and learnings that has helped them to reach that success. And while a smart person can learn from their own mistakes, a genius learns from the mistakes of others. And that's why we have so many geniuses listening to this podcast to wonder, what are these mistakes? Can you avoid them? Can you fail faster through them? My guest today is an incredible human being who has a master coaching certification in not one, but 3 different organizations, as well as being a doctor in psychology, has an MBA. This guy has really got it all. He's going to bring you so much knowledge and wisdom. So buckle up and welcome John Reed to the show.
Oh my gosh, Catryn, this is so nice to be with you. Thank you for the invitation and including me. I'm a big fan of yours and happy to be here.
Oh, well, I'm so happy to be here. It's been so nice getting to know you in our other part of our lives that we've met through, and being able to bring you on and spotlight all of your information. In your intro, because there's so much that you do, I failed to mention that you're also an author. You sent me a copy of your wonderful book called Pinpointing Excellence. And I've got to tell you, it is an incredible guide to executive coaching. The amount of depth and research that you put into this is really, really incredible. And it's kind of your life work, and to bring the profession of coaching to just that professional level.
Well,
So,
you're very kind. You know, I as I've said to you, I was lucky 20 years ago to enter the field with pretty good training in business and psychology, and as well as coaching. And that was very nice because many of the people that I saw who were in the field at that time, and it's the same thing now, it's pretty much the same conditions, weren't particularly well qualified.
hmm.
So competitively, that made for, a nice situation. But I really, over the years, have gotten to a point where I'd like to help clients of coaching more broadly, not just my own. So I'm trying to help them set the bar higher in terms of their own expectations of coaches so
Sure.
that they get the best possible service and ROI. And as you know, Catryn, in coaching, there are no required standards in education or training or experience. It's
There's there's really not. And I think there's so many different levels to coaching. I know it wasn't something that I ever sort of sought out. Uh,
Mhm, mhm.
I didn't even really know about coaching outside of sports, um, as I'm sure most people do. And it wasn't until I started dipping toes into the entrepreneurial waters that I started to run into a lot more coaches than I had in the professional level, because, I wasn't really at that high executive level within the profession, where I think, executive coaching starts to becoming, more common of a thing to hear. But I've met so many coaches now, and I can even use air quotes there. Sometimes it's just a label that they start using, that there's no actual certification, there's no training, there's no nothing. It's just, this is something I experienced in my life. I personally figured out a way through it, and now I can coach others to do the same.
And you know what? There are thousands of people who are very well intentioned. They really want to help.
Yeah.
And 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 they may have had an experience. You're absolutely right. They may have had an experience where they benefited and they want to reach out and share from that, which is all wonderful. I admire all of that. But to go back to your opening, I get contacted pretty regularly by clients of other coaches who, to put it tactfully, are less than thrilled,
Mm.
and they have spent a significant chunk of money. And pretty soon after doing that, they realize that this person, while maybe well-meaning, didn't really know much of anything about business or psychology or coaching or ethics. And those are the four areas in executive coaching that are pretty important. Nobody really disputes that, but that's not what I'd like really, Catryn, is for people who are in the market for coaching, executive coaching, and are going to make a significant investment in that, to know what to look for so that they can protect themselves.
Well, let's break that down a little bit.
Sure,
Let's go and
sure.
talk about, like, who is the person who is the best candidate for executive coaching? And what are some of the things that they might recognize in their life that says, maybe I need some executive coaching? Like, what are
Yeah.
kind of those, milestones or pivotal moments?
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, that's a very good question. I actually have a little one-page summary of about 8 or 10 questions that people can ask themselves to determine whether now is the right time or not for executive coaching.
Hmm.
So I'll maybe provide that to you, and you can provide it more widely if you want.
Yeah.
But basically, some things that come to mind immediately are, um, be clear about why you want coaching and what you want to accomplish as a result of coaching. That's the first thing. So
Hmm.
coaching is as you know, is a popular kind of a cool, cool thing to be having, and sometimes for good reasons. But some people enter into it because it's a cool thing to do, and they're not really clear about what they want to have accomplished at the end of it,
Right.
right? So the first thing when someone approaches me, I ask is, look, at if we could hit a home run in coaching over the next 6, 12 months, whatever, what would that look like? What would change? Why is that important to you? What impact will that have on your career, on your professional life, your life overall? And if I get a nice, clear answer back that is evidence of a lot of thought and obviously a lot of motivation, that's the other thing that I look for, then that's a good sign. But if I get these sort of, oh, you know what? That's a good question. What do I want to get? And at that point, I will typically say, well, listen, love to work with you down the line. Uh, and why don't you take some time and kind of think through what would be an ideal outcome for you. Um, so that's one thing. Also, if you want to go into coaching, be aware of the fact that coaching is not something where you get together with someone and he or she has a magic wand. You just wave, and they wave the magic wand and poof, right? So coaching involves work, both in the sessions and in some cases between sessions. Behavior change, positive behavior change, is typically an outcome of good coaching. But like developing new skills or decoupling yourself from bad habits
Right.
is not something that happens automatically. You have to practice it and work at it and keep it on your radar. So that's why I sometimes want to make that clear to somebody who's contemplating coaching. Uh, Also, when you're in coaching, there's usually a process by which you're going to learn about yourself. You're going to learn maybe through 360 feedback or through some psychological assessment instruments that I like to use about strengths that you can capitalize even better than you have been, and about development areas, some of which you maybe didn't know about.
Yeah, there's blind spots.
Their blind spots could be derailers, could be that you do know about them, but you feel like
Denial.
denial. I'm often denying that I can't become a PGA golf professional,
There's
right?
still
The
time,
truth
John.
is, there's still time. There's still time, and if I played 72 holes of golf every day for the rest of my life, I wouldn't even be close to that. But
That sounds exhausting.
yeah, it is exhausting.
I've
So
played
anyway,
golf twice in my life, and usually around hole 10, I'm like, why do we still keep going? It really needs to end at 9.
right. Why am I going through this process that's so irritating, and I'm paying money for it? Now it is probably a nice place to walk or drive the golf cart, but yeah, when I was starting to play, and I'm really not that good, it was irritating. But you mentioned athletic coaching. I'm sort of a jock, and so that was my earliest exposure to coaching. But
Well, and what I love so much about just the word coach, and I nerd out so much about words and their meanings and their interpretations of them.
yeah,
But what I love so much about coach is that, you know, in a athletic, no matter what it is, you have time where you're out there with the coach, and the coach is helping you with technique and strategy and the history of it and why it's done this way and all of these different aspects of it. But then when it's game time, the coach can't really do much. Maybe they can shout out a few things from the sidelines. In some sports, you can't really. So they are kind of like, okay, now it's up to you. And I think that's such a big difference that I've seen people struggle with, is they want the coach to give them all the answers and solve all their problems, be the magic silver bullet. But it really requires work from the coachee, that they have to be the ones who are actually doing the work,
yeah.
and taking the advice and taking those steps forward.
Hey, that's beautifully described. That's a great picture that you're painting, Catryn. I think, as you know from coaching, we can sometimes be lucky enough to be in the room or on Zoom observing our client doing what they do, leading people, conducting a meeting, so on and so forth, presenting. So you can then go back and go over with the client, what happened, how they were feeling at this point in the process or that point, what was feeling, where did they feel like things were moving smoothly, they were pretty competent in the skill, where they felt like it was bumpy and where they were struggling. And then you can go through all that, re-prep the client, and ultimately the client goes back out into the professional world and applies what they're working on, and they gradually get better. So the other thing that's always great about that is, if you have 360 feedback from the people who work with the client, you can periodically get that feedback from them. So you can get it, if you're the client and the coach, you can get a reading on how well the client is doing at adopting those new skills, abilities, perspectives, so on and so forth. But in some ways, it's very much like athletic coaching, except that sometimes the coach sometimes I'm given permission to physically be in the room, sitting in the corner, hopefully unobserved, just watching what's going on.
Yeah.
Can't always do that, but that's always because then you can really see
Yeah,
what's
you're
going.
watching the game.
You're watching that. Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. You're practically, you've got box seats, or if you're not even sitting on the bench.
Yeah,
So
you're on the field. Well, to your point about the sort of vast array of what's in the coaching world, I started distancing myself from the word coach. And I think it was even subconsciously, I wasn't aware of what you've so eloquently put into words, especially in your book, of how there's not this sort of standardization. So I thought, there's so many coaches out there, well-intentioned, but not getting the results they wanted. So I stopped calling myself a coach. I made up a new
Mhm.
phrase. I
Mhm.
started using people optimization specialist.
But I think that's brilliant, Catryn, because you have differentiated yourself.
Well, thank you.
And I also think um, there aren't 700,000 other people out there using the same term. So you've set up a niche for yourself
Well, thank you.
that is you know, that is very valuable. So I think the flip side of that, at the other end of the spectrum from you, is somebody who maybe was very accomplished as a pick almost anything in any occupation, and then someone said to them, Walter, or Susie, you've got a really nice way with people, and I like the way you communicate and things like that. You should be a coach. And they the next day they think, well, good, I'm a coach today. So I'm going out and so there's the only barrier that currently exists is whether you want to call yourself a coach or not.
You're
There's
so right.
absolutely, but for the consumer, think about it. What that means is, let's just say everybody could start calling themselves a brain surgeon, right?
Yeah.
And there'd be it wouldn't take long for people to see who was competent and who was not. But in that elapsed time, think about the damage that could be done, right?
Oh,
By
absolutely.
well-meaning people who don't know the first thing about what the hell they're talking about.
With psychology and parts of coaching, it is akin to brain surgery, just without knives and scalpels.
You 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 know, and again, psychology is, you have to be licensure is something that's always good to have, right? It's like being board certified. Um, but again, there are all kinds of different forms of psychology. There's clinical psychology, and I've had some clinical training, but I'm not licensed as a clinical psychologist. I'm licensed as a business or organizational psychologist,
Mm,
right? But there are some clinical psychologists who uh, have decided that that's not really what they want to do full time for a variety of reasons. And they just sort of slide over and say that they're an executive coach who is
mm,
trained in psychology. That's true. They are trained in psychology. They're not trained in business psychology, however. And if you're talking to executives who are in organizations,
right.
right? So, anyway, the point is, the terminology and the way you describe yourself should be as clear to the consumer and as specific for the consumer as possible, right? That's a pretty straightforward idea. But let's just say I'm a clinical psychologist and I know I'm not an organizational psychologist. I will, perhaps for marketing reasons, I'll emphasize that I'm a psychologist, right?
Right. Because
The
everyone
impl-
knows that term broadly.
Everybody knows that term broadly, right? Right. And again, and some aspects of clinical psychology can be helpful in executive coaching. For example, understanding anxiety or understanding depression. That kind of information or that kind of awareness, sometimes with people in the C-suite, you can pick up some of those stressors or challenges, and then help that person also get clinical support for what they're struggling with. So that I don't mean clinical skills are of no value, but ideally organizational psychology is what you really need in an organizational setting. So
And that makes sense as going back to the NDs,
yeah,
a brain surgeon who's focused on the brain. It's
yeah,
different than a cardiothoracic surgeon that's focused on, your heart.
right, right. Or let's just say I'm a podiatrist, right?
Yeah.
And I'm tired of looking at feet. And so I'm tomorrow I'm just going to say, you know,
Let's go to the other end.
I'm a doctor, and I'm going to be helping you. We're going to open up your cranium, and I'm going to help you in that way. Some people readily will pick up on that and protect themselves, and and not be taken advantage of. So, but the subgroup that I worry about in all these situations, Catryn, are the people who sort of make a leap of faith in what they're listening to. They don't exactly know what criteria they need to specifically see, right?
Yeah.
Like, is this person a board certified brain surgeon, right?
Right.
Right.
Right. And I think, because the medical field, that's such a great analogy and going back and forth. I've really enjoyed having this back and forth between the two. But with the medical profession, we've had so much longer to understand what are the right questions to ask and to have a little bit more, self-authority over that piece. And that the coaching industry is still pretty new in its infancy. And we started this mentioning that you are a master coach out of 3 of the top organizations. So my question as we're beginning to wrap up this interview is kind of, what was your thought process on going to 2 and then going to a third? And has that experience of having these 3 different organizations helped kind of fill your belief of having some standardizations to the field?
Well, that's a terrifically insightful question, Catryn. And I, writing a couple of books about this in an effort to help consumers be as discriminating as possible in vetting and investing in a coach. It was actually my wonderful wife who said to me, you need to make sure you're doing everything you can, in addition to providing great service, to walking the talk. So in that sense, I wanted to be able to say that I'm about as well qualified in terms of the credentials and so on and so forth as possible. Because if I'm the person out there flapping my gums and encouraging people to be as qualified as possible, I need to model that. So that's why I went back for the other 2, and I'm in the middle of some additional training, so it's continuous. But I want to model what I'm advocating, because I wouldn't have good integrity if I wasn't doing that.
Sure.
So yeah, great question.
Well, I love that you're continuing to grow and to learn and to go from that. I think there's always something to be said that We can hear the same thing 700 times, and yet 701 is when the light goes off and we get it, like really get it. So it's always important to be putting ourselves in positions where we're learning and growing, and even if it does seem repetitive, being able to understand a new level, a new layer, and how that can help someone to be to their best, because that's really what coaching is about getting the best out of the people that we're working with and having them live up to their full potential.
Yep, absolutely.
So for you as a coach, what are some of the characteristics you look for in the people that you coach?
Oh, well, motivation is one. Self-awareness, not perfect self-awareness, but self-awareness is a plus. I think and an understanding of what coaching is and isn't. And it, again, sometimes you can help them in the process of being introduced, as I was saying earlier, to some of the realities, right? Like, are you actually ready to look at the things you do well and the things you need help with, right? Are you psychologically ready to do that? And then are you maybe another thing would be, are you in a place, maybe you're a very busy executive, and if you don't have enough time for coaching sessions and for some of the work in between coaching sessions, maybe this isn't the right time for coaching. Maybe you need to be at a point where you have a little more bandwidth, right? I don't have many people that don't make it to coaching sessions, right?
They prioritize them.
But sometimes when I was a brand new coach and didn't know any better, I would agree to work with people without screening them for motivation and focus. So I hope I'm answering your question, Catryn.
Absolutely. And then what are some of the benefits that people experience from working with you?
Oh, well, that's very nice of you to ask. I'd say people generally they are able to accelerate their career growth. If they're a COO, they can get prepped pretty well to be a CEO, or if they're an individual contributor, they can transition into managing people, leading people. Some senior leaders need to scale their leadership to allow them to be effective over a growing organization. Sometimes there can be situations where somebody needs over a long period of time, not just 6 months, but some clients stick with this process for a number of years and go through 1 or 2, sometimes 3 promotions.
Wow.
So some people want to get promoted and then do well at that level. So I'd say career growth and career acceleration are usually the 2 outcomes that I'm lucky to have with clients.
You're like a CEO incubator.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you. It's a real privilege to work with very bright people, and I think in many cases I learn more from them than they do from me. But things seem to go pretty well. So.
Well, I love that so much. So for all of the listeners who have been with us, want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn. I also, the website for our firm is QuinnReed.com, QuinnReed associates with an S.com. and those are the two places where they can get a lot of information. And my own email is just John, JOHN, at QuinnReedAssociates.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today and your knowledge and your insight and just your sincerity in what you believe about the coaching industry and the hard work and the heart work that you've put into making that something that is a legitimate profession, getting legitimate results for people.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you again, Catryn, for having me on, and congratulations also on your impact and success. It's great to be with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And to the listeners, thank you so much for being here. I know you picked up some great nuggets. Make sure that you also pick up John's book, Pinpointing Excellence. I will have the link to it in the show notes for this episode, so you can click it and easily get it into your shopping cart and get it into your home and into your hands so you can get this knowledge into your brain. Please make sure to like this episode, share it with others who can also learn from this, and subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes like this, because you don't know what you don't know until you learn to the good, bad, and ugly of business. Until next time, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.